Last year I put out a video on how we run a barbecue pop-up from home. That video got a ton of views and inspired a lot of people to do the same, and I know that because I've received hundreds and hundreds of messages from people all around the world helping them with the more specific details of doing that from home. And so a couple of weeks back, when we did a pop-up at a local brewery put on by another local to Bicester food vendor named Out of the Smoke, I wanted to try and do something similar but focus on the things that you have to do when you're not in the comfort of your own kitchen selling barbecue, including things like transportation of meats, keeping meats hot, and coming up with a checklist to make sure that you don't forget anything. So another local food vendor and burger obsessor, Charlie Shares Food, was there selling as well. So all three of us set up and sold food to the customers of the Angel Pub in Bicester while they sat in the sun and drank beer. So this video repeats itself a little bit from the video I did last year, but I enjoy showing how I do stuff, so I decided to keep it all in, and inevitably there will be people who didn't watch that video that are watching this. So if there is anything that you want to know, anything I missed, anything specific, or anything you want to know more on, please drop a comment below and I will respond to it. Also, don't forget to subscribe and enjoy the video. Right, so it is Wednesday. We have a pop-up on Saturday, so we're going to get a few things done early this week. So first off, I'm going to be making sausage. I'm going to be separating the fat from the lean, and these are brisket trimmings that were in my freezer. We're going to weigh out the lean, we're going to weigh out the fat. I'm taking a photo with it just so I remind myself how much lean meat there was, and I can calculate the percentages for the spices, the salt, the curing salt, and all those good things. So we're going in with some milk powder as a binder, some pink curing salt because we're going to cold smoke these, going in with plenty of black pepper, plenty of garlic, a little bit of cumin, a little bit of chili powder, a little bit of paprika. And that's our spice mix with our binder. Now we're going to weigh out the cheese. And if you want to see in more detail how I cook sausage, I will put a link just above here. And what I'm going to do is blend the cheese. I used to cube the cheese, but it's a lot easier just to blend it. I feel like you get a really good even distribution of cheese. You get little nuggets of cheese all around the sausage rather than those big clumps that tend to melt. And it's also a lot quicker when you're doing a big batch. We're also going to add in some whole pickled jalapenos, and I'm going to use the pulse setting on my food processor. That results in like a nice chunky kind of medium diced jalapeno for the sausages, and I feel like you get a better texture with this than if you were to put it through the grinder. That's something that I used to do, but I do like the texture that the pulse in the food processor gives. So next up, we're going to grind our lean meat and our fat together. So in addition to the brisket that you saw me include, I did add a small pork shoulder just to subsidize some of this meat, so it's about 60% beef and 40% pork shoulder. So I've mixed the spice blend that you saw me make with 10% ice cold water. Some people add this in dry. I like to mix it with the ice cold water because I feel like you get a really good even distribution of the spices throughout the sausage meat. And then using fresh clean gloves, I'm going to mix until I get a really nice, well-binded, tacky sausage farce. And you can see all that cheese and jalapeno studded perfectly evenly throughout the meat. So we'll just simply get this loaded into the sausage stuffer and turn out a nice long coil. I'm going to go back round and tightly link individual sausages, and I think we're going to make about 60 sausages today. And you can see that that cheese and jalapeno is nicely studded throughout the sausage, making a nice even bite. So those sausages will go into the fridge overnight to dry out the skins, ready for cold smoking tomorrow. So this is a little bit later in the evening. It's about 11 PM, so I decided to make some sauce. It's still Wednesday. This is pretty simple. Ketchup, mustard, brown sugar, apple cider vinegar, Worcestershire sauce, loads of pepper, garlic. Whisk that all up, and this is pretty much going to be my pork sauce that I'm going to use to top my pork ribs, top my pork shoulder, and serve on the side on Saturday. And I've made just about 7 litres of it. So it is Thursday, time to get that sausage I made yesterday cold smoked. If you've watched my channel before, you'll know that I like to cold smoke my sausage using the Masterbuilt, just because it's really difficult to maintain a temperature of 150 Fahrenheit in an offset, and I just don't have the time. This Masterbuilt, I can load up with loads of wood, get a really smoky, flavorful sausage, and I can get on with other things. So we're going to cut these in 2 batches. I've got 60, this holds about 30, so we're going to load these, cold smoke them for about 4 hours, drop them in a nice bath, put the next 30 on, They'll go into the fridge for a couple of days until Saturday about midday, when I'll reheat them ready for service at 2 p.m. So whilst those sausages are smoking, I'm going to make some pink pickled onions that I can put on the tray on Saturday. So I'm just basically going to quarter up some red onions. Meanwhile, I've got some white vinegar and some sugar in a pan just on a low heat, dissolving that sugar, making up a nice brine. Then I'm going to run these onion quarters through the food processor to get them nice and thin, put them into a Cambro food container, then pour over that vinegar and sugar mixture over the top, and they will sit in the fridge until Saturday. So back to the sausage. This is the second batch. They're looking nice and smoky, nice and firm. These are going to go into an ice bath. This is partially to stop them from cooking, but also partially to tighten up the casings and make sure that they're nice and snappy. They're looking pretty good. A few little air pockets in them, which is common when you're doing that rope style twisting rather than linking them link by link. And they're looking kind of pale in this light. I'm not sure why. They look a lot redder in real life. These are going to the fridge to chill out until Saturday. So it's pretty late, Thursday night, really good time for me to get on with stuff. My wife and daughter are again in bed, so I'm going to chop up the potatoes for the potato salad. So I'm just going to get a pot of cold water onto the hob. And then anyone who makes a lot of potato salad might get frustrated with cubing up a load of potatoes. I bought a potato chipper, so this is to make fries or chips. And if you just run a potato through this, you end up with kind of lengths of potato, and then you can just dice those lengths and you end up with some nice cubes, and it makes making potato salad really quick, or a lot quicker than it would be if you're having to cube it yourself. So I'm going to spend about 40 minutes doing this to about 7.5 kilograms worth of potatoes, and this is going to get me ahead for tomorrow. Next up, I've got some briskets to trim. So we're only doing 3 briskets this weekend. The reason for that is that brisket is really not that profitable for us, and it's probably not that profitable for a lot of people. So there's no point in me wasting the space on my smoker cooking briskets that are really only going to make me about £10 per brisket or $13 per brisket, when I could be using that real valuable smoker space for things like pork shoulder and turkey and ribs and things that are profitable for us. So 3 briskets it is. Real simple trim. Done videos on this in the past. You can click the link above if you want to see that. These are looking good. I've got another 2 to go. So I'll get those trimmed up and then I'll head to bed. So it's Friday, the day before our pop-up, so I'm going to get ahead before we start cooking at about midday or 1 o'clock. So I'm going to start making the potato salad dressing. So I'm just going to be using sour cream, mayonnaise and yellow mustard, and I'm really just looking for a colour at this point. I'm going to add some pepper and my secret ingredient, Lowry's seasoned salt. Mad Scientist Barbecue hit me up for a collab. I'm going to be adding some parsley and some dill to this potato salad dressing, and I'm just going to go through that parsley and pull out any thick, hard stalks. I don't want that in my potato salad. The dill doesn't really take much picking through. The stalks are quite thin. I'm going to quarter up a red onion and get that into my food processor using the pulse function again to get that nice medium dice. I'll add that medium diced onion to the potato salad dressing, and then we're going to put in some pickles into the food processor, use that pulse function, get some nice medium diced pickles, add the parsley, blend that up until it's nice and fine, make sure that it's nice and edible, and then the cooked potatoes I'm going to put into a gastronome pan and let cool. Whilst those potatoes cool down, I'm going to use my crinkle cut knife to make the pickles. These will be the pickles that will be served on the side, just like those pink pickled onions. I think they look way better when they're crinkle cut rather than putting them through the food processor, so I take the time to use the knife, and then I'm going to top that off with the pickle juice, and they'll go into the fridge and they'll sit there until Saturday when I need them. Just add in 3 cans of pinto beans to a clean pot, and I'll deal with those in a minute. And then I'm going to add my potato salad dressing to my potatoes and mix it all in, stir it all up. And that is pretty much my potato salad done, ready to go. I'm going to pot it up individually. I think we got about 30 of these in the end. And this saves me a job on Saturday. It's already potted up and ready to go. So back to the pinto beans, we're going to add cumin, tomato passata or sieved tomatoes, plenty of black pepper, and a good amount of salt to taste. And this is something I like to do with my pinto beans. I like to take some dried ancho guajillo, if that's how you say it, chipotle chilies, put them into a pan of boiling water, soften them up, and then I'll put them into my blender, splits that up into a real nice fine paste with a little bit of that water, and then I'll add that to the pinto beans, and that gives it a nice deep rich smoky flavour. Next up, we're going to brine our turkey. So I've got a pair of turkey breasts here. I'm just going to take the skin off. I don't like to serve the skin as it gets rubbery, and then we're going to make up a brine. You can see in more information how I make my turkey and brine my turkey in the link above, but essentially I'm using a 5% salinity brine. I've got some water, some ice water into my Yeti bucket, and these are going to sit there for about 12 hours. I would like them to go 24, but I was a bit busy and didn't get these on until a little later than I'd like. So it is about midday. I'm going to load up the Smoky Oak 130 gallon pit with some Smoky Oak dried seasoned wood. There'll be a link below as to where you can buy it, and then we're going to start trimming some of our meat. So it's getting a bit more exciting now. I'm going to start trimming up these beef ribs. So firstly, we're just going to round off the corners. Shout out to Jerby for that little tip. And then I'm going to start trimming down some of the fat cap. So beef ribs really annoy me in the fact that there's a thick silver skin layer under the fat. Ideally, I wouldn't be taking off any fat at all off beef ribs, but that silver skin layer really doesn't render out for me. It might do for other people and can become really tough. So I like to remove it. You might notice that I didn't remove the fat on all of the ribs, and that's because not all of the ribs have silver skin above them. So if you're cooking short ribs, make sure to check to make sure that there's no silver skin underneath that fat, or it can become quite tough regardless of how long you cook it. So you'll see that I'm pretty consistent with my seasoning. I'm going on with a pretty heavy layer of pepper and then Lowry's seasoned salt. I'm knocking off the excess of that Lowry's, patting it in, and I'm just going to do the same to all 4 racks of beef ribs. Moving on to my brisket, pretty much the same, just a heavy layer of coarse black pepper. I use the Schwartz brand, and then a pretty heavy layer again of that Lowry seasoned salt. I like the Lowry's because it gives a nice salty flavour, but also gives a little bit extra like garlic, turmeric, cumin, that kind of thing. So I'm going to season up 3 of these briskets. That's all the briskets that I have. And then I'm going to dump the remaining black pepper into my tray. And this is going to be my seasoning for my pork shoulder. So I'll get those pork shoulders seasoned up, and these will be ready to go on the pit. So just a reminder, it is Friday. Smoky Oak 130 gallon is pretty much up to temperature, and I'm going to get these briskets on. So we've got one at the back, we're going to put one at the front, make sure that it's nice and plumped up. This is a slightly bigger one, so it'll go closer to the firebox. We'll get those 4 racks of beef ribs on, we'll get the pork shoulders on, and we'll be cooking this lot for about maybe 12 to 14 hours. That should take us to about 2 AM where we'll get the pork ribs on, we'll get the turkey on. But for now, we're going to close this down. We'll probably be cooking at about 250 for the first 3 hours or so, a nice chilled low fire. So while the meat is cooking, we're going to get on with making some banana pudding. This is a classic when it comes to Texas barbecue. So 1 box of vanilla jello and 1 box of vanilla wafers is going to make us about 10 portions. We're going to make this 4 times over, so we're going to have 40 individual portions to sell on Saturday. So we're going to add 2 cups of milk and spill it all over the worktop, clean it up, start again. 2 cups of milk and 1 can of condensed sweetened milk. We're going to add the jello to it, whisk it up, add it to a bowl that's big enough to actually hold the jello, put that in the fridge and let it rest for a couple of hours. Then we're going to take 2 cups of double cream or heavy whipping cream if you're in the US, and we're going to whisk that up till it's pretty firm. I like it very firm because it ends up with a much more fluffier texture in the final product. Then we're going to take our set jello and our whipped cream and fold that together nice and gently. Slice up 2 medium bananas nice and thin, and then we're going to start building it. So we're going to put in a layer of vanilla wafers at the bottom, then we're going to add that jello and whipped cream mixture on top. Top that with the banana slices, and then pretty much start again. Vanilla wafers, cream, banana slices, and so on. Pretty much until you run out of all the product that you've got for this batch. Then we're going to top it with the leftover broken crumbs of vanilla wafers, and then set that in the fridge for about 12 hours before we pot it up into individual portions. Here's just a quick shot of another sauce that we're going to be serving on Saturday. It's the Leroy & Lewis mustard barbecue sauce. If you want the recipe for that, head over to the Leroy & Lewis Patreon page where you can get that recipe. So we're about 5 hours in, cooking at about 250, maybe spiking up to about 260. We're running a nice chilled low fire, trying to stop that radiant heat, and we're going to check on the briskets, the beef ribs, and the pork shoulders, see how they're doing.
Should we check the briskets?
So the smoky oak's looking pretty even at about 250. As I say, we're spiking up to about 260. So let's open this up and give it a look. Good colour on the beef ribs, the pork shoulders and the briskets. I'm pretty happy with the colour on these all over. The pork shoulders are pretty much ready to wrap. The briskets are looking terrible. That big peeled up section is pretty typical of an Australian brisket. They tend to cut out the decal, which is really annoying, but we'll deal with that. Maybe serve some burnt ends. Beef ribs are feeling good, nowhere near wrapping, but these pork shoulders are looking like they need to be wrapped up pretty soon. Briskets have got a long way to go, and you can see that gash there. Really not pleasant, but something that we're just going to have to deal with. It'll still taste good. So we're just going to keep on cooking. So I didn't film it, but these pork shoulders are done. These will hang out on the kitchen side for a couple of hours before going into the warmer, and I'll talk more about the warmer in a bit. So moving back out to the smoker, this is about 11:30 at night, and I'm just checking the fat render on the brisket. They're looking pretty dry to me, so I'm pretty confident I'm going to wrap them. If you want to know more about how I cook briskets, you can click the link above. So just a little after midnight, I'm going to tear off some butcher paper and get my briskets ready to wrap. I'll show you me wrapping one of these. You've probably seen me do this before, if not me, many other YouTubers. So I'm going to wrap this up. Nothing special here, wrapping it like pretty much everyone else does. But what you'll notice is that once I've wrapped it, I'm going to push down on the edges and make sure that there are no kind of bits of paper sticking out, and that all of the edges of the brisket are nice and tucked in close to that butcher paper. So here's another one of those briskets, just so you can see the colour. I'll get this wrapped up and the other one, and we'll be good to go. So you'll remember about 12 hours ago I made up 4 lots of banana pudding. What I'm going to do now is pot these up individually into individual portions as they'll be served on Saturday. I'm going to put them back into the fridge for another 12 hours. That's going to give them a total of 24 hours in the fridge. The reason I do this is because you end up with a much more cakey, fluffy product if you allow it 24 hours in the fridge before you serve it. So I'm just scooping them into individual portion sizes. As I say, they'll go in the fridge, and it's going to save us a lot of time on Saturday when someone orders a banana pudding. We can just pull it out of the Yeti and it will be ready to go. These are going to get lids on as well, so they will be ready to go. So the banana puddings are done. You might be able to see that those briskets are wrapped under there, and I've just come out just to check those beef ribs, testing them for tenderness. They are not quite done yet. So I'll put them back in, close it up, and I'll go inside and start prepping my coriander for tomorrow. So this coriander is going to be used to top the corn, and I'm going to pull out any thick stalks. So about 45 minutes after I last checked them, I'm going back out to these beef ribs. These ones at the back are feeling nice and tender, and they are ready to come off. So I had 4 racks. The 2 closest to the smokestack were the 2 fattier ones, and they are feeling pretty good, so I'm going to take them off. The 2 closest to the firebox, which you'll see me leave on now, are the leaner cuts, and they're not quite done yet, so I'm gonna move those backwards closer to the smokestack and keep an eye on them, and then I will take the 2 that are done, take them inside and put them into the warmer. So while those briskets and beef ribs are finishing up, we're just going to get the pork ribs ready. We've got about 14 or 15 racks, and we're going in with just pepper, and then we're going to use the Franklin barbecue spice rub on top of that. It's kind of like Lowry's seasoned salt. I got it from Pro Smoke here in the UK, and it's actually really good, and it was a good kind of one-stop shop for rib rub. So I used that. I'll probably use it again. I definitely recommend trying it out. Nothing special, but I like it because it's not a sweet rub. So we'll get those rib racks seasoned up and ready to go on the pit, and then we'll get the turkey breasts, which have been brining for about 12 hours. Again, I wish it was 24. We'll get those rubbed in just pepper with a little bit of garlic on top for a bit of extra flavour, and these will be ready to go on the pit. So I didn't manage to film this, but those briskets were done. They came off. They are currently sat on the kitchen side, just cooling down before they go into the warming oven. The beef ribs were done. Again, they came off. They're just sat on the kitchen side. I drenched them in beef tallow or beef fat just to kind of keep them moist, and they'll go into the warming oven in a bit. Meanwhile, we're getting those rib racks on. We're getting those turkey breasts on closest to the firebox just so they cook a little bit quicker, as poultry seems to turn out best when you do that. And we'll shut this down and come back in probably about 4 hours. Right, so a little update. It's 2:10 in the morning. The briskets have come off, the beef ribs have come off, pork shoulders have come off. So some of you who may not have watched my videos before, or maybe familiar with how barbecue restaurants cook and hold their meat, a lot of these meats are coming off at 1 AM, 2 AM, and I'm not serving until 2 p.m. tomorrow. So the briskets, beef ribs, pork shoulder are all fully cooked. They are ready to go. I can slice into them now and they will be perfectly fine. But in order to maximize the space that I have to cook on, they're going to go into a food warmer or a warming oven. So I'm going to let the meats rest down in an ambient temperature just on the kitchen side for a couple of hours until they come down to about 150 internal temperature. And they'll go into the warming oven and they'll sit there overnight, long rest hold, until we serve them tomorrow. Well, we'll transport them first. And what that means is I can continue to use my smoker to cook the ribs and the turkey and the sausage. Meanwhile, briskets are keeping warm, ribs are on, turkey's on. Just keep cooking. So a little look at the turkey breasts and the ribs before they come off. The turkey breast is going to come off now. The ribs have still got a little while to go. Looking good, looking smoky. So these will come off and go into the warmer. So the ribs are off. They were cooked entirely unwrapped. I'm just going to show you how I finished them. So I'm going to take 1 cup of water to 1 cup of sugar. You can do any equal volume parts. Then we're going to warm that up over a medium to low heat just to dissolve the sugar till it looks like water again. Pour that into a squirt bottle, and then we're going to wrap these ribs up with a squirt of that simple syrup and put them straight into the warmer. So just to kind of explain what I'm doing, so I've cooked these ribs fully so they're tender. Again, I could cut into them, serve them now, and they'd be great, but I need to put them into the warming oven until service later. So rather than just wrapping them up and with nothing in there, I'm adding that simple syrup just to add a layer of sweetness. I've unwrapped these ones just so we can have a look, see what they're looking like, and you can see that they're not mushy or falling apart. They got a good colour to them. That glossiness that you see is from the simple syrup, and it's going to be like a salty, peppery rib with just an added touch of sweetness. I wanted to say that I did forget to film the making of the coleslaw and of the street corn. So this is my smaller Yeti. The slaw, potato salad and banana pudding are going to go into this, and it's going to be filled with ice to keep all those things nice and cold throughout service, and we'll serve directly from it. So a few people have asked in the past how we transfer hot sides and how we keep them warm. We've got beans and corn, and we're going to cook them here at home, and then we are going to put them into these GN pans. But to transport them, we have these are silicone seal lids for these pans. So once you put those on, push it down, it's a real tight seal. We can transport everything in these and it's not going to spill. So as I say, we'll be cooking the hot sides at home, but in terms of how we keep the food warm whilst we're serving, we're going to be using these chafing trays. You might be familiar with them. They're often used at places like buffets, but they work really well for hot sides when you're serving barbecue or any type of street food really. It's basically a tray filled with hot water, and then into that tray you add your tray of food. So there's basically a lining of warm water between the two trays. That's going to keep your food warm with a lid. And then just below that you can see those metal cylinders. Inside those are essentially candles, and they look like this. They burn from anywhere between 2 to 8 hours depending on how much you pay for them, and they're filled with some kind of liquid. You just light the wick, set them beneath the chafing trays, and they will keep a nice steady heat below your food, constantly keeping that water topped up with heat, and you'll be able to keep food in there for, I don't know, maybe 8 hours. But as I say, these work really, really well for us. So this list might be useful to some people. This is basically a list that I put together to make sure that I didn't forget anything when I go out to do a pop-up. I think it's really useful to make a list like this beforehand so you can, one, make sure that you have all the things that you need, but also when you're loading things into your van or into your car and ready to head out, you can tick these things off. If you're anything like me, if I don't have this kind of list, I'm definitely going to forget something. And you can see we've got everything from the chopping block to my knives, all the little disposable things like napkins, right through to all of the meats, food, sides, all that kind of stuff. So obviously your list is going to look very different to mine, but feel free to screenshot it. It might give you a good starting place, and you can build on this, remove stuff, add stuff, and it might make you think of things that you wouldn't have otherwise thought about. So this is about 11 o'clock in the morning and it's time to load up the van. You can see the warming oven in the back there, that is empty. And what we're loading in right now is my large Yeti 125, and this holds all of the hot meat. I'm not transporting the hot meat in the warmer because I worry that meat's going to kind of fall out and stuff. So what I've done is I've loaded all of the hot meat into my Yeti, and I'm just going to talk through specifically how I load it because I think that's pretty important. So you'll have to excuse my awful PowerPoint design presentation. As I didn't actually get footage of me loading the Yeti, I thought this was the best way I could explain it. So I'm starting off with putting the pork shoulders at the bottom of the Yeti. These are going to be pulled anyway, so I'm really not too bothered about things going on top of them. So the pork butts go at the bottom, and just to the side of that, kind of stacked on top of one another, we've got the turkey breasts. Again, I'm not really too fussed about anything crushing these too much. They're pretty robust and firm, so these are pretty much going to go at the bottom as well. Then I'm going in with the beef ribs, so they're pretty robust. Again, I'm not too worried about anything crushing them. So these are going to be laid on top of the pork shoulders. And it's worth mentioning that these were wrapped in butcher paper at this point as well. Then on top of that, we've got our 3 briskets. Ideally, I wouldn't have anything on top of the briskets, but I definitely don't want to put anything on top of the ribs, which are pretty soft. So next up, briskets. They'll sit comfortably on top of those beef ribs and those pork shoulders. And then finally, on the very top, the most delicate of all the things is the ribs. I really wouldn't want anything on top of the ribs as they kind of get, there's a risk that they'd get squashed and mushed. So these sit on top as the last thing. So it might seem a little bit weird that I've explained the way I've loaded the Yeti and drawn up a diagram, but I think this is something that people may not think about. And you definitely don't want to get to a pop-up and have a load of stuff on top of your ribs, for example, and when you go to get them out, they've started to fall apart and break, especially if you're cooking them on the more tender side of things. And then when we arrive at the pop-up and set the warming oven up, all of this meat will go back into the warmer and I'll be serving directly from the warmer throughout service. So this is purely just for transportation purposes. So obviously if you don't have a warmer or you're not able to transport a warmer, you can just take it in the Yeti and serve directly out of the Yeti or any cool box that you own. So the guys are just loading in the shelter, which you'll see a bit later once we get it set up, and basically going through that list that I showed you just to tick off everything, make sure that we've got absolutely everything that we need, and then we'll drive about literally 10 minutes down the road to where the event is. So in my backpack, I've got important things like the card reader, the iPad, which we use to take the orders using a system called Zettel, extra chargers, things like that to make sure that the iPad doesn't run out or the card reader doesn't run out and our phones don't run out. So here's our little setup. It's nothing special. It's just a shelter with 2 tables. We've got the warming oven in the back there, and you can see stacked on top of that are a load of trays already covered with butcher paper, just to make service that little bit quicker, just like we did with the banana pudding and the potato salad and the coleslaw. Just doing little things to get ahead, just to try and speed up that service, as cutting to order can be pretty slow. I emptied and washed those pinto bean cans, and I've used them to hold things like forks and spoons and napkins to make it easy for customers as they order. And you'll also see that there's a little perspex frame, and in that is basically a QR code that I generated that takes you straight to our Instagram account, and I put it there just so customers can easily scan it, go to our Instagram, they can tag us if they take any photos, things like that, and just a general way to help build more of a following to those people that may not already follow us. So as I say, we didn't get a ton of footage, but someone filmed this and sent it over to me. You can see that the line for our stall was pretty long. It's quite a long line to wait in, I think over an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, but thankfully people waited. One thing we definitely learned was that we need to keep the line updated in terms of what's selling out sooner. So I'll just talk through our ordering process. Basically, customer makes an order and we almost stand around listening in for what that customer orders. You can see me at the back there if you go back, looking around and just listening to the meat order. So we've got Adam running all of the sides. So he's picking up the hot sides, he's picking up the cold sides that are coming out of the Yeti at the back. You can see there he's scooping some beans out of those chafing dishes, which are keeping the beans nice and hot. And meanwhile, I'm at the back just cutting all the meat. In between us, we've got one of those trays. So I'm slicing meats, putting it onto the tray, and Adam is dealing with all the sides. He's also going to make sure that every tray has the barbecue sauce and the mustard barbecue sauce. And again, he's scooping some hot corn out of those chafing dishes straight into a pot. That'll go on the tray, and that'll be the customer's side orders done. And that's pretty much our first tray of barbecue for the day. You can see here that the customer pretty much got all of the meats. We've got some brisket, some sausage, they got a beef rib at the back there. They went for the corn and the beans. You can see the sauces on the right hand side, the pickles, and they've got a banana pudding, which is just on the bottom right hand corner there. So we were so busy we didn't really get a lot of pictures on the day, but some customers did send some over or tagged us on Instagram, so I showed these. This customer got the family tray, which is basically all the meats and all the sides. You can see it's looking pretty good there. I'm pretty happy with how it looked. And I'm pretty sure that this is the same photo but from a different angle perhaps, but you can see all of the sides there, all of the meat, and again, I'm pretty happy with how it looks. And just some more photos. This person got some sausage, ribs, and I think there's some brisket under there. They've got that pulled pork, more pulled pork, sausage. You can see the beans and the corn with the pickles and the sauce. And that pulled pork is actually tossed in that barbecue sauce I made right at the beginning of this video. And that's pretty much all the photos that we have. Again, they were sent in by customers, so I appreciate that. And that was us pretty much sold out. We sold out in about an hour and a half. I would love to have been able to cook more, and I probably should have cooked more, but I would have had to light the second pit, so I'd have had to light my Franklin pit, and that would have basically doubled my wood costs. So that's something that I need to weigh up before an event. And on this occasion, I decided not to light that second pit. If I was cooking on a 500 gallon or something like that, or even a 250 gallon, I'd be able to cook more, and it would cost me roughly the same amount in wood, but I don't have that luxury just yet. But I went home without any leftover food, so that's pretty much all I could ask for. So that's pretty much everything we do when we do a barbecue pop-up. I do think there are things that we missed out that I didn't film, but I was super busy. I was pretty much on my own until James and Adam came at about 9 o'clock in the morning. But hopefully there was enough in there that it will help you if you're planning on doing something like this yourself. And again, you can always ask questions down below if I didn't cover everything. And even if you're not planning on selling barbecue, hopefully you found this video entertaining anyway. So thanks very much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. It really helps me out, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks for another video.